Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. It is really great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We've got a really fascinating one today.
We really do. We're taking you into a space that, well, it completely flips the script on what it means to be prepared.
Right, because usually when you hear the word, survivalist, your brain goes to a very specific place.
Oh, totally. You picture this gloomy, reinforced concrete bunker,
Yeah.
right? Just floor-to-ceiling stacks of canned baked beans.
Massive plastic jugs of water, maybe a ham radio in the corner.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the whole philosophy there is basically just, outlasting the apocalypse in the most miserable, joyless way possible.
It's just a purely defensive posture. That bunker mentality is entirely about hunkering down and trying to stretch out a finite supply of, flavorless paste.
Like to keeping your heart beating.
Yeah, you might be alive, but you certainly aren't thriving. It treats nature as the enemy you have to hide from rather than a system you can actually collaborate with.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is going to be so refreshing for you to hear. We are stepping out of the bunker and into the sunshine.
Literally.
Literally. Our mission today is to explore the concept of a survivor garden, specifically how you can maximize calories, ensure a long shelf life, and build just absolute resilience inside a really small, no-dig backyard kitchen garden.
And the sources we are pulling from today are just brilliant.
They really are. We're looking at the project notes and excerpts from something called Garden Math or Mathematic for Havenleiser for any Danish speakers out there.
And the best part is who actually wrote this survival blueprint.
Right. Our guides for this whole thing aren't, grizzled off-grid mountain men.
Yeah.
They are two incredibly smart 11-year-old boys named Kesser and Steen.
I mean, what these two young guys have put together is a masterclass in biological strategy. It really is.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
They're combining this intuitive sense of nature with some surprisingly sophisticated horticultural science. They aren't just planting seeds and hoping for the best.
No, they're engineering an entire ecosystem.
Exactly.
So, by the end of our conversation today, you are going to understand how to fuel a working human body without breaking your back tilling soil.
You'll learn why you might actually want to start hiding pumpkins under your bed.
Yes, that's a real thing.
Yeah.
And you'll find out the fascinating, kind of terrifying reason why these 11-year-olds flat out refuse to plant sunflowers.
That part is wild.
But before we get to the specific crops, we really need to set the stage with the philosophy behind this garden. Because Kesser and Steen actually get a bizarre amount of pushback from adults.
It's so strange, but the criticism they receive is highly revealing, I think, about how disconnected modern adults have become from their own food systems.
Oh, absolutely.
When you read through the source notes, people are writing in to literally scold the project. They complain about child labor because, Kesser and Steen are only 11.
Right.
Others scoff at the mathematics, aggressively pointing out that a tiny 200 square meter backyard bed could never fully supply a modern family with vegetables every day of the year.
Let me just pause there because I loved the boys' response to this.
Yeah.
The source material actually notes that Kesser and Steen felt some critics were getting, quote, woke about their age and the project's parameters.
Yeah, which is just funny to hear from kids.
It is. And just to be completely clear to you listening, we're simply reporting the exact phrasing from the author's notes here. We're not taking any political stance whatsoever. But the overarching point they make is that these adults were completely missing the forest for the trees.
Completely.
The authors say that complaining about whether an 11-year-old strawberry patch offers 100% off-grid independence is like a politician cycling into a hurricane without a bicycle helmet.
That analogy perfectly captures the absurdity of it. The critics are focusing on entirely the wrong hazard. The purpose of the Boys Project isn't to create this isolated, flawless utopia where you never have to interact with the outside world again. The goal is to shift your focus to real, highly probable vulnerabilities.
Like if you're standing on the deck of a sinking ship, looking down at a perfectly good lifeboat, you don't start complaining that it doesn't have cup holders.
Or a stereo system, exactly.
The goal here isn't luxury off-grid perfection. It's practical resilience.
And when you look back at history, specifically in places like Denmark, a 200 square meter kitchen garden, what they'd call an allotment garden, was historically considered perfectly adequate.
For a whole family, right?
Yeah, for a family of 4 or 5. During major crises like the World Wars, people survived on these standard plots. We've just collectively forgotten how to manage that space.
So the soil isn't magical. The technique was just better back then.
Precisely. The Boys Project asks us to look at the garden through a modern lens, factoring in contemporary threats.
Like sudden water scarcity, rolling energy crises, stuff like that.
And the dramatically declining nutritional value of store-bought produce. They are essentially taking their great-grandparents' survival tactics and upgrading them.
Upgrading them with modern agricultural science,
Yeah.
which is so cool. So if we are going to adopt that resilient mindset, we have to look closely at the math.
The garden math.
Right. How do you actually fuel a working human body from such a small plot of land? Because reading the source material, the biggest shock to me was realizing we basically have to toss out the old nutritional rulebook.
Yeah, the historical diet has to be completely reevaluated. If you examine the classic survival model from a century ago, the diet was roughly 70% carbohydrates.
70%, that's massive.
It is. People relied incredibly heavily on root cellars full of potatoes and grain. But that wasn't because a 70% carb diet is optimal for human health or immune function.
Oh, right.
It was driven purely by what was cheapest to grow in massive quantities. They needed immediate, slow-burning energy to fuel intense, all-day manual labor.
They were essentially using complex carbohydrates to fuel human tractors.
Exactly.
But in a modern crisis, or, even just trying to build resilience today, you aren't necessarily plowing 10 acres by hand every single day.
No, most of us definitely weren't.
So if 70% carbs is out, I'm assuming a modern survival garden has to look more like a balanced plate. What does Kesser and Steen's garden math actually look like?
Well, for a modern crisis situation where you still need physical endurance, but also long-term cellular health, our realistic breakdown is about 50% carbohydrates.
Okay, so half carbs.
Right. Then 25 to 35% fat and 15 to 20% protein. The carbohydrates are the easiest part. You get those from stable, easy-to-grow sources like potatoes and root vegetables.
And the protein.
That naturally points toward legumes. Peas and beans are absolutely non-negotiable in a survival garden.
Okay, let's look at the protein aspect for a second.
Yeah.
Because if you tell an average person they need to grow 20% of their family's calories in protein, they picture needing massive industrial fields of soybeans.
Yeah, they do.
But in a 200 square meter no-dig garden, how are beans pulling their weight?
The brilliance of legumes in a no-dig system is that they are nitrogen fixers. Most plants rapidly deplete the soil of nitrogen, which is a crucial building block.
Right, they just suck it all up.
Exactly. But beans and teas form this symbiotic relationship with rhizobia bacteria in the soil. These bacteria actually colonize the roots of the bean plant, forming little nodules.
Like little bumps on the roots.
Yes. And the bacteria pull nitrogen gas straight out of the air, which the plant can't do on its own, and convert it into a usable form for the plant.
Oh, wow. That's incredibly efficient.
In exchange, the plant feeds the bacteria sugars. So while you are growing your crucial dietary protein, you are simultaneously fertilizing the soil for the next crop. It's a biological free lunch.
That is incredible. So the beans take care of the protein and the soil at the same time, which leaves us with the fats.
The tricky part.
Yeah, this is the part of the source material that made me do a double take. Hitting 25 to 35% of your calories from fat is described as the ultimate fat problem in a survival garden.
It really is a challenge.
I mean, fat is obviously crucial for feeling full, for brain function, dense energy, but I have to push back on the practicality here.
Sure, go ahead.
If fat is this critical, but you and I don't have massive diesel-powered industrial oil presses sitting in our backyards, how does this actually work? Am I really just supposed to sit on my porch eating handfuls of raw seeds like a bird?
To put it bluntly, yes, you are.
Really?
Really. In a purely plant-based, small-scale backyard scenario, trying to press your own cooking oil is a massive waste of caloric energy. Fat in plants is almost entirely concentrated inside seeds and nuts.
So pressing it is just too much work.
Way too much work. The mechanical effort required to crush, press, and filter a tiny cup of oil out of thousands of seeds burns more calories than you get back.
Oh, that makes total sense when you put it like that.
Yeah, so the most biologically efficient strategy is simply to eat the seed whole. You let your digestive system do the extraction.
Okay, so what specific crops are Kesser and Steen relying on to solve this fat problem?
There are a few realistic pathways, each with different timelines. Hazelnuts are fantastic for northern climates. They yield a tremendous amount of fat per square meter and store beautifully through the winter.
But they take a while to grow, right?
That's the downside. A hazelnut bush takes 5 to 7 years to establish. Walnuts are another incredibly fat-dense option, but they are very slow-growing and cast massive shade.
Which you can't have in a tiny 200 square meter plot.
Exactly, it demands too much space. Because of this, the boys focus on immediate annual solutions. Sunflower and pumpkin seeds.
Oh, okay.
You can grow them every single summer. They are packed with healthy fats, and you just roast or eat them whole.
The source also mentions that in a real-world scenario, you wouldn't just rely on plants either. Community trading becomes a massive part of the fat equation.
Oh, absolutely.
They talk about taking your surplus organic apples and trading them with a neighbor who raises ducks or chickens to get eggs. That one trade instantly covers both fat and high-quality protein.
Community integration is the ultimate fail-safe. No single garden plot is an island. Trading a carbohydrate surplus for a fat surplus is how human communities have survived for millennia.
Okay, so hitting those macronutrients keeps your heart beating. You've got your potatoes for carbs, beans for protein, seeds for fat. But the source material makes a deeply profound point here.
About morale, right.
Yes, simply surviving is not enough if the food destroys your morale. We have to talk about avoiding what Kesser and Steen call death by boredom.
This is perhaps the most impressive psychological insight to come from an 11-year-old.
Seriously.
You might not physically starve to death on a diet consisting solely of boiled potatoes and plain beans, but you will suffer severe appetite fatigue.
You just get sick of eating it.
Right. In a prolonged crisis, morale is quite literally a survival mechanism. If your food is intensely boring, people, especially children, stop eating enough to maintain their energy levels.
Let's break down the crops that balance bulk with joy then. The calorie kings come first. The potato is obvious. It's the ultimate satiety guarantor.
Lots of weight in a small footprint.
Exactly. But then we have winter squash and pumpkins. And Kesser and Steen discovered this hilarious but totally genius low-tech storage hack for these.
Under the bed.
Yes, you can literally just hide pumpkins under your bed for months.
Winter squash and Hokkaido pumpkins are marvels of low-tech survival. When you leave a pumpkin on the vine until the very end of the season and then let it sit in the sun for a couple of weeks to cure...
It hardens.
Exactly. The outer skin hardens into a dense armor. The stomats, those are the tiny pores on the skin, they close up completely.
Oh.
This creates an impenetrable barrier to bacteria and mold. Unlike a summer zucchini that turns into fuzzy mush on your counter in 5 days, a cured winter squash requires 0 electricity to store.
No refrigerator, no root cellar required. You just slide it under your bed in a dark, dry space, and it will feed you in February.
Exactly.
And then there's the Jerusalem artichoke, which the source delightfully calls the rebellious cousin of the potato.
It is the ultimate safety net crop. Jerusalem artichokes are perennial tubers. Once you plant them in a corner of your yard, they will come back year after year, almost completely independent of human intervention.
So you don't really have to do anything.
Nothing. You can neglect them, you can experience a drought, you can try to dig every single one of them up to eat, and inevitably you'll miss a piece of root the size of a fingernail, and the whole patch regenerates next spring.
They're practically unkillable calories.
Unkillable.
Okay, so those heavy hitters keep you alive. Let's talk about the morale boosters that keep you sane. Steen has this hilarious twist on the culinary term umami.
He calls it tsunami.
Tsunami. I love that. He associates this deeply savory flavor primarily with tomatoes, but I have to question the logic here.
Why is that?
Well, anyone who has ever gardened knows tomatoes are total devils.
They really are.
They're thirsty, they're prone to blight, they need constant feeding, they're high-maintenance luxury tenants. If we're building a pure survival garden, shouldn't they rip the tomatoes out and plant a dozen more unkillable Jerusalem artichokes?
If you are looking strictly at a caloric spreadsheet, yes, tomatoes are terrible investments. They are mostly water and offer very little bulk energy.
Right.
But this is where the boys' understanding of psychological survival shines. Tomatoes are incredibly rich in glutamates, which provide that deep, meaty tsunami flavor.
Oh, I see.
A handful of roasted tomatoes turned into a quick sauce makes a plate of bland, starchy beans and potatoes taste like a comforting, rich meal. They prevent the appetite fatigue we discussed earlier.
And the boys don't just pamper these luxury crops with store-bought chemicals either. Their techniques are wild.
They really are.
They grow the tomatoes from seed, but to get them strong, they boost their compost with actual seaweed they gather directly from the local beach.
That is a phenomenal example of mineral cycling. Ocean seaweed is packed with trace minerals, things like iodine, magnesium, and potassium.
Stuff that's usually missing from regular dirt.
Exactly. It's often depleted in terrestrial garden soil. By composting seaweed, they are pulling the ocean's nutrient density right up into their backyard food web.
They also use fermented garlic tops as a natural spray for their no-dig garden. Now, garlic is obviously a massive flavor booster for cooking, but how does spraying fermented garlic juice actually help the garden survive?
Fermentation is key here. When you ferment garlic tops, you are cultivating a massive population of lactic acid bacteria.
Yeah.
When you spray this liquid onto the leaves of your garden plants, those beneficial bacteria colonize the leaf surface, actively outcompeting harmful fungal diseases like powdery mildew.
Oh, wow. So it's protecting the leaves.
Yeah, and furthermore, the sulfur compounds in the garlic, specifically allicin, act as a potent natural deterrent for pests.
That's amazing.
The plant absorbs some of these compounds, which essentially triggers its own immune system, a process known as systemic acquired resistance. The plants bulk up their own defenses because the garlic signals that an attack might be coming.
It's basically an immune-boosting vaccine for their vegetables.
Yes.
And speaking of immune systems, they prioritize red onions over yellow ones, specifically because red onions are packed with quercetin. That's a flavonoid known to support human immune health.
It just shows these guys aren't picking crops out of a seed catalog at random.
No, they are selecting for specific biochemical benefits.
They view the garden as a holistic biological pharmacy. And that level of sophisticated thinking leads us perfectly into some of their next-level hacks, where they treat plants as tools, not just food.
Yes. Let's talk about the sunflower ban, because earlier we agreed that sunflower seeds are a fantastic, fast-growing fat source.
Right, we did.
But surprisingly, Kesser and Steen actually refused to plant sunflowers anywhere near their food crops.
Why? This specific detail highlights just how much research these 11-year-olds have done. They banned sunflowers because of a biological mechanism called phytoremediation.
Okay, break that down for me. What is phytoremediation?
Certain plants are classified as hyperaccumulators. They essentially act like botanical vacuums for soil contaminants.
Botanical vacuums.
Yeah, and sunflowers are exceptionally good at this. Their roots produce chelating agents. These are chemical compounds that bind tightly to heavy metals like lead, arsenic, and zinc that might be hiding deep in the soil.
From like old lead paint or runoff.
Exactly. The sunflower pulls these heavy metals up through its stalk and stores them inside its cellular structure to keep the plant itself from dying. In fact, after the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, fields of sunflowers were planted specifically to pull radioactive isotopes out of the water and soil.
That is wildly fascinating. So these kids recognize that a sunflower isn't just a pretty yellow flower or a snack, it's a hazardous waste sponge.
Right.
If you grow them in potentially contaminated urban backyard soil, and then press those seeds for oil, or feed the whole seeds to your backyard chickens, you aren't just getting fat.
No, you are systematically concentrating heavy metals directly into the eggs you feed your family.
That is terrifying.
It is. But they understand the entire chain of consequence. If you want a resilient food supply, you have to be absolutely certain you aren't accidentally mining invisible toxins and serving them on a dinner plate.
And it's not just cutting-edge biology they're tapping into. They use historical hacks, too. Let's talk about rhubarb.
Oh, rhubarb is great.
It's one of the most reliable, low-maintenance survivor plants you can grow. But the source material shares a hilarious, slightly gross anecdote about how rhubarb was traditionally fertilized in the old days.
Ah, yes. The famous toilet bucket technique.
Yep.
Historically, particularly in rural areas, people would empty their chamber pots or outhouse buckets directly onto the rhubarb patch.
Just straight on there.
Straight on. Rhubarb is what gardeners call a heavy feeder. It requires massive amounts of nitrogen to push out those giant fleshy stalks every spring. Human waste, properly aged or applied to non-fruiting perennial roots, provides a massive nitrogen spike.
The source actually quotes an older gentleman named Gunnar, who sums it up perfectly. He says, quote, "It's the shit that puts food on the table."
Gunnar knows what he's talking about.
I mean, it sounds disgusting to modern sensibilities, but it is the ultimate closed-loop nutrient cycle. You're taking human waste, which is a disposal problem, and letting the rhubarb roots filter and transform it back into a highly resilient, edible calorie source.
It's pure efficiency.
And speaking of using history as a tool, I loved what Steen said about herbs. He calls wild herbs the Middle Ages GPS.
It is an incredibly clever historical observation. If you look at the geographical spread of certain perennial herbs across Europe, you are basically looking at a botanical map.
A map of what exactly?
You are tracing the walking routes of monks traveling from monasteries in southern Europe up into the cold north. Monks carried medicinal and culinary herbs with them.
Oh, I see.
If you look at the botanical names of herbs like sage or thyme, they often carry the Latin tag officinalis. That word indicates the plant was officially used in the monastery's officina, or pharmacy.
So when you're wandering through the woods or an old property and you find these specific herbs growing wild, you are quite literally standing on a living map of medieval foot traffic.
Exactly. And in the context of a survivor garden, herbs are mission critical. They don't provide bulk calories, but just like the tsunami of the tomato, they mask the monotony of a limited diet.
That makes a lot of sense.
Many of these monastic herbs, like thyme and sage, are evergreen. In the dead of winter, you can brush the snow off them and harvest fresh aromatic oils to flavor a pot of root vegetables.
We also have to talk about a plant that is going to make a lot of suburban homeowners cringe. It's a plant most people spend their entire weekends trying to destroy: amaranth, commonly known in the U.S. as pigweed.
Amaranth perfectly illustrates our completely broken modern relationship with food and nature.
How so?
To the vast majority of people in the West, pigweed is an invasive nuisance that ruins a manicured lawn. But in many parts of East Asia and South America, it is a revered staple crop. Kesser and Steen note that you can grow amaranth right in the same bed, layered between your sprawling winter squash and your climbing beans.
So they're stacking the garden vertically to save space?
Yes, the climbing beans actually use the thick, tall stalks of the amaranth as a natural trellis to climb up toward the sun. But the amaranth itself is a nutritional powerhouse.
What's in it?
Well, it utilizes a highly efficient form of photosynthesis, meaning it thrives in brutal heat and drought when other greens wither and die. And you don't just eat the seeds, the broad leaves are incredibly succulent and juicy.
Oh, so you eat the leaves too?
Yeah, they are packed with vitamin A, vitamin C, massive amounts of calcium, iron, and a surprising amount of protein. You harvest and cook it just like spinach. It provides a massive, nutrient-dense yield from a plant that most people literally poison with chemical weed killer.
And just to fully round out this ecosystem, the source notes briefly touch on integrating livestock. We mentioned the community trade of apples for duck eggs, but the boys also specifically mention raising rabbits.
Rabbits are brilliant for this.
They take up very little space, they quietly eat the green scraps and weeds from the garden, and as the source jokingly points out, having rabbits means there's always easy food available if unexpected guests drop by for dinner.
When you zoom out, you see what the boys have really built. It is a dynamic, living web of resilience.
It really is.
Potatoes and perennial artichokes are securing the underground calories. Beans are pulling nitrogen from the sky while climbing the drought-proof amaranth.
Winter squash is slowly curing in the sun before being hidden under a bed.
Rabbits are turning waste into protein. It isn't just a garden, it is an engine.
So, as we wrap up, what does all of this mean for you, the listener? If you are staring at your backyard right now wondering how to feed your family in a real pinch, Kesser and Steen's math changes everything.
It changes the whole paradigm.
I think the core takeaway here is that we need a total redefinition of the word crisis. A crisis isn't just about your favorite brand of cigarettes getting expensive or gas prices ticking up a few cents right before a summer road trip.
True welfare and true security is synonymous with resilience. It is about knowing for a fact that you have a biological buffer built up between your family and the extreme fragility of the modern supply chain.
And the most urgent point the sources make is about timing. Whether you have a sprawling half-acre lot in the suburbs or just a tiny 2-square-meter sunny balcony in the city, the time to start learning, failing, and planting is now.
You can't wait until the last minute.
You absolutely do not want to be desperately Googling how to build soil fertility or how to cure a squash on the day the corner grocery store suddenly announces they can only deliver canned soda. You want these biological systems already humming in your backyard.
The learning curve for gardening is incredibly steep. You need seasons, not days, to understand your local soil biology, to watch how the sun moves across your specific yard in November versus June.
Exactly.
Kesser and Steen are succeeding and sleeping soundly because they are doing the hard work right now, long before it actually becomes an emergency.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with, pulling from that brilliant insight the boys had about amaranth.
Oh, right, the pigweed.
Yeah. We have built an entire multi-billion-dollar landscaping industry centered around eradicating plants we arbitrarily deem weeds. We spray chemicals to kill plants like amaranth, which are virtually unkillable by nature, require zero synthetic fertilizer, and happen to be absolutely packed with essential protein, iron, and vitamins.
They are, from an evolutionary standpoint, biologically superior survivors.
So it makes you wonder if the ultimate survival garden relies on highly nutritious, stubbornly unkillable plants like amaranth. Might true self-sufficiency require us to completely unlearn what a weed even is?
That's a great question.
Maybe the first real step to surviving whatever apocalypse comes our way isn't pouring concrete for a bunker. Maybe it's just stepping out into your own backyard and finally learning how to eat the very things you spent your entire life trying to destroy.
A truly fascinating perspective to leave off on.
Keep digging deep, everyone. We will catch you on the next deep dive.